We're going to do a couple of tricky arithmetic series questions, and this should hopefully help you to do a wide variety of them, as these are sort of quite diverse. The first one that I wanted to look at gives you a series that looks like this. It's not the tool, that's a 120 plus 116 plus 112 plus dot 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 28. So they give you the last term. And they ask you to find the number of terms and the sum of terms. So the two things to find is the number of terms and the sum of terms. So because they give you these numbers and you have the formulas for arithmetic series, which you need to have handy, they are in the formula book, but you will remember them eventually from using them. One of them looks like this: the sum to n terms is n over 2 of the first term plus the last term. So this is like the average. And the other way of writing that formula looks like this: n over 2 of 2u1 plus n minus 1 d. Right, sometimes you see the 2 here under everything, but it's the same thing as putting it in front of the whole bracket and putting it as a fraction down here. So those are the two formulas that we're going to be using in these questions, really. And to find the number of terms, then what we're looking for is n, and they give us the first term and the last term. So we can use here this equation, but hopefully you can see that, well, we don't know what the sum is going to be because they don't give us the answer of all of this, right? And we don't know what n is because that's what we're looking for. So actually we have two unknowns. And luckily we have two equations. We have that one, but we also have this one down here where the d is included. And the advantage of this one is that we do know d from looking at these numbers. We know that d is the difference between these two, minus 4. So we do know that d is minus 4. And hopefully by combining these two equations, then that means that we can find n. So the sum of n is the same as the sum of n. They're both the same thing. So actually I can make an equation that says that all of this equals all of that. So n over 2 of u1 plus un, u1 is 120, plus un, which is 28, it's the last term, must be equal to n over 2 of 2u1, which is 120 times 2, which is 240, plus n minus 1, we don't know what n is, so we got to keep that like that, n minus 1 times d. And d we do know is minus 4. So from that equation, we should be able to figure things out. Because, well, we have n over 2 here, and here we have n over 2. So that means that we can divide both sides of the equation by n over 2. And I get 1 here. If I divide by n over 2, I get just 1. And if I divide here by n over 2, I get also 1. So that leaves with the inside of the bracket, which is 148, must be equal to the inside of this bracket, which is 240 minus 4, I can put it in front, times this, right? Minus 4 times n minus 1. I can open that up to get 240 minus 4n. Minus 4 times minus 1 is plus 4. So I put the numbers all together and I have 148 here. 240 plus 4 is 244. So I'm going to pass the 4n to the left hand side by adding 4n to both sides. And here I have 244. And I'm going to pass the 148 to the right, subtracting both sides, 148. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so if we do these, you can do that in your head or a calculator if you're lazy. You get 96. So if we get 96 and we divide that by 4, we get n. And so 96 divided by 4 is 24. In other words, there are 24 terms in that series. Okay, so the idea of making this equal to that one was just came from noticing that there was 2 unknowns and we needed 2 equations, and the 2 equations that we know are these 2, and actually we do know these, so that's where the insight came from for deciding to use both equations, making one equal to the other. All the n's cancelled except for this one here, and that kept on going, and that allowed us to calculate n. So how do you find the sum of terms? Well, now that we know what n is, it's very easy. The sum of terms, just use this equation, which is faster. If n is 24, then n over 2 is 12, and we're going to have to multiply that by the sum of first term plus last term. And so 148 times 12, if you do this in the calculator, 148 times 12, it is 1,776. So that's the first question done. Okay, so I'm going to clean this up now. We're going to look at the second question. The second question is kind of interesting because they don't give us very much information. They just give us this, 15 plus 22 plus 29 plus dot 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 plus the last term, 176. And that's it. They just give us that, and they ask us to find the sum of n. So we don't know how many terms there are. We don't know what n is, so that makes getting the sum of n tricky. And but we do have u1, right? We have un, and we have d, right? But we don't know what n is. So if we put this in the formula for Sn, right? Sn was n over 2 of first term plus last term. And so this one we cannot use it because we don't know what n is. Don't know the full number of terms. The other one, which is a more, this in here it's 2u1 plus n minus 1 times d and all of that. For that one you also need n for the other formula. So our priority here is first to find out n, and since they don't give us the sum, that's what we're trying to find out, we're going to have to use a different method. To figure out the answer for that. And so we can look at this pattern and we can say, well, we can see d, right? We can all find d from here. D is going to be 7, positive 7. And so in a way we can figure out what n is by using logic and saying, well, this last number here is 29, and the question that you can ask is, how many more d's am I going to have to add to this to get to 176? So in other words, if I find the difference between 176 and 29 by subtracting, which is 176 minus 29, the difference is 147, right? And 147 is going to take you all the way to 176. So if we know how many terms there are between the 29 and the 176, including the 176, then to that number of terms we just add 15, 22, and 29, and we have our n. Hopefully that makes sense. So this number here in between, 147, which is going to see you all the way to 176, if we divide that by the difference, which is 7, we get, divided by 7, we get 21. So 21 are all the terms that go after 29 all the way up to 76, but make sure that you realize that the 21st term, the very, very last term, is the 176. So you don't need to add to those 21, you don't need to add the last term. Okay, that sees you all the way until the end. So 21 plus 1, 2, 3, 24 is your number of terms. Hopefully that argument makes sense. And so now you can say, well, if that's true, then my sum of terms is going to be 24 over 2, which is 12, times first term added to 176. And so if we do that on the calculator, 176 plus 15 equals 191. And if I multiply that by 12, I get 2,292. I don't know what happened there. 2,292. All right, so that was that question. They didn't give us very much information, but we can kind of figure out what n is from looking at these things. There is another way of doing it, which uses algebra, which says, okay, so here is my last term. You can write general terms. You can say, hey, I know what u1 is. u1 is 15. I know what u2 is. u2 is u1 plus d. You can then do an equation for u3, and you can do an equation for un. un being 176 being equal to u1 plus n minus 1, which you don't know, times d. But you do know u1 and you do know d. So actually, using algebra, you can figure out what n is without doing this argument by solving this equation here. You just figure out what n is, and then you're not doing this kind of thing which you might get confused and add the 176 at the end again. So there is an algebraic way of doing it. By giving you un, you can figure that out because you know u1 and d. Okay, so the algebra for that would be quite easy. So I'm going to clean this up and we'll go to the last question. Well, actually, we're already on 12 minutes and I don't want to make a video that is too long. So I'll go to the next video for the next question on the arithmetic series, and I'll see you there. Ciao, ciao.